My girlfriend's betrayal. I uncovered her affair with a criminal and set a trap. Let me tell you something right off the bat. Something I'm not proud of. Before you judge what's coming, know that grief and betrayal can twist a person into someone they don't recognize. This isn't a story of a perfect hero, but of someone broken, seeking a twisted kind of justice. I was just 19 when my father received his death sentence, pancreatic cancer. My mom was working day and night, and after a brutal 4-year battle, he died following a triple bypass surgery, leaving a void that consumed my mother entirely. These were truly dark times. My grades tanked, and I had to juggle an after-school job to support my mom, who was a shadow of her former self. The minimum wage I earned was a joke, barely scratching the surface of our needs. A friend, seeing my desperation, introduced me to the world of drug dealing. He said if I needed extra cash, I could work for him and his buddies, pushing coke. After some deliberation, I went for it. I finished high school with enough money to fund college, but I carried the weight of my past like a lead cloak, keeping as low a profile as possible. I originally wanted to be a lawyer but eventually became a paralegal. It was in college that I reconnected with Rita, a high school classmate. We'd been close back then, and I discovered we'd both harbored secret crushes on each other. Soon, we became friends, best friends even. We envisioned a future together. My previous relationships had been catastrophic failures, leaving me emotionally numb, questioning my capacity for love. One previous girl, Becky, I'll call her, I rescued from an abusive relationship, teaching her that she deserved better. But she left me shattered. Finding Rita felt like a second chance. But it also made me hyper-aware of the fragility of relationships. Rita was, I believed, the love of my life. We were meant to be. We took things slowly, talking honestly about our past, supporting each other's dreams. She was playful, protective, and swore she loved me unconditionally. She didn't need to know about my past. Things with Rita were amazing. We loved each other and already had plans to start a family. A few months later, disaster struck again. My mother suffered a terrible accident, crushed by a large shelving unit. Neighbors rushed her to the hospital, where she was found to have numerous injuries, including broken bones and a leaking heart valve. A week later, during the biopsy, they found renal kidney cancer. Things had been going great with Rita. We had moved in together in a town about 30 miles from my mom's. When I told Rita about my mother's accident and that it meant we would see less of each other, she assured me that she had no desire to put anything between us. She wanted to be there for me, emotionally, in any way I needed. I urged Rita that if she decided she wanted to take a break, or thought she might be interested in anyone she met, she needed to tell me. She assured me that she cherished me, and that nobody could ever take my place. My mom started chemo. Initially, it seemed to have none of the horrible side effects. It was well into her second month before she noticed weakness. Every day Rita would message me asking how my mom was doing as soon as she woke up each morning. We got to see each other about every 2 weeks. My mom's condition worried me constantly. Rita would often encourage me to go out with friends and enjoy life. She enjoyed going to outdoor activities, even without me. My mom's failing health that summer meant no fun in the sun for me. But Rita would go out with friends, and I enjoyed hearing about their silly adventures. I was genuinely glad she wasn't sulking over the issues in my life. She always expressed concern and sadness when I told her what was happening with my mom. The chemo was killing the cancer cells. However, I realized cancer was no longer destroying my mother. It was the chemo. I needed to take a break. So a group of my mom's friends came to sit with her to give me a little free time. Rita mentioned she was going out with friends, and I asked where she was going. She gave me the address of where she and her friends were to meet. When I arrived, I saw most of her friends, but there was a man I'd never met before. He gave me a firm handshake and introduced himself as Henry. I acted politely, but something felt off. I don't think Rita realized I felt something was fishy with Henry right away. I'm sure many people have a gut feeling when encountering someone suspicious. Because of my past activities, I guess it takes one to know one. One instinct told me there was something shady about Henry. None of what I was experiencing at the time was jealousy. Rita had many male friends, but something about Henry made me skeptical. I began to talk with Rita and her friends, monitoring Henry from afar. Rita and I stayed at her place that night before I had to leave and head home. Over the next several weeks, my mother's condition began to worsen. Still, Rita and I spoke and texted throughout the day. Every day. In hindsight, I realize now that I was initiating most of our communication. But at the time, I wasn't keeping count. One day a few relatives volunteered to look after my mom to give me a break. I headed to see Rita. Calling her on the way, she told me what restaurant she and her friends were having dinner at. As I was pulling into a parking space, I saw Henry pull out. Though he didn't see me, unfamiliar with my car, I made my way inside, where Rita and her friends greeted me with hugs and words of sympathy and encouragement. We all had dinner and a few drinks before Rita and I went back to her place. Before bed, Rita stated that she had no idea and didn't know if Henry had even been at the restaurant. The restaurant was in a strip mall with several other businesses. I thought perhaps he had come out of one of those stores. Around noon the next day, my mother became critically ill and had to be transported to the hospital by ambulance. She had pneumonia and, being weakened by chemo, was susceptible to many ailments. For 3 weeks, she was hospitalized. They gave her many medications, but her condition worsened each day. It wasn't good seeing her like that. I knew she wouldn't want to leave this earth in the gloomy hospital room. So I insisted we bring her home to make things as peaceful as possible. We got my mom home, and she told me she wanted me to be strong for her and also told me she was ready to go and see my dad once again. I got one of my mom's friends from church to look after her for a few hours, and I got in my car and drove to Rita's. I hadn't called because I was crying too hard to speak. When I arrived, I saw a black Buick parked behind her car. I didn't think anything of it as I was focused on soon losing my dear mother. I used the key she had given me to enter the kitchen. As we always did, I heard music playing as soon as the door opened. But I didn't see anyone in the living room or on the back porch. I made my way down the hallway to her bedroom and heard noises coming from inside. I stopped. I realized the sounds I heard were sex. My heart sank even further as I slowly put my hand on the lock and opened the door a crack. I stopped in my tracks as I saw them completely naked, unaware of my presence. Honestly, my first instinct was to run full speed and land a punch on his nose. But I knew I had to stay out of trouble for my mother's sake and my job. Shaking with anger, I went out of the house through the back into my car. I wasn't seen. I just sat there, bawling my eyes out for about half an hour. I cranked my car and headed back to my mom. Everyone assumed my tears were for my mom, which they were. Partially. But logic knew my mom was my top priority. I felt a rage I'd never known before. I thought of calling her, letting her know what I'd seen, and cursing her out. But a stream of profanity wouldn't bother her. I made sure my mother was comfortable. I cried. I slept. I woke up crying. I woke to my cell phone ringing and saw it was Rita calling. I ignored the call on the urge and I wanted to check on my mom, who was in a deep sleep due to the morphine they had her on. I managed to text Rita that I was very busy with my mom. After forcing myself to eat and take a shower, the hospice nurses came by to check on my mom. After checking her vital signs, they informed me that my mother would die within 48 hours. I thanked them and walked out into the backyard. I managed to text Rita and told her my mother's condition was about the same. I didn't want to see her. I didn't want to talk to her. And I didn't want her showing up. I owed it to my mom to do everything I could to ensure her last moments were as peaceful as I could. The next evening, just before 6 o'clock p.m., my mother took her last breath. The next 3 days, I was in meetings with her pastor and making final touches on the church and burial. But I could not for the life of me get the images of Rita and Henry having sex out of my head. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. I was mad at Rita. The way she acted so friendly toward me made my blood boil even more. I wondered if they hadn't already been intimate when I first met him. That made me want to know exactly who this son of a bitch was. I paid a P.I. to run background checks on Henry. I sensed from the moment I met him that he was bad news. There were mugshots of Henry from many years before. I was once arrested. And I've done some despicable things in my life. I've known people who have done horrible things intentionally and under the influence of various drugs. Still, Henry had a long rap sheet for various crimes, several DUIs. Reckless driving, breaking and entering, and drug arrests were listed as I moved down through the report. I discovered Henry had been out of prison on early probation for approximately 2 years, after being convicted of sexual exploitation of a minor and a host of other sexual offenses. I admit I was disgusted Rita had betrayed me. But the thought of what diseases that felon had given her, or that she was sleeping with a sex predator and then, eventually, back in prison made me feel physically ill. I doubt Rita had any idea who she was involved with behind my back. Looking back, she had intimacy issues before, but never like that. I have no doubt anyone who knew of Henry's record would have considered him a vile creature, who should never have been let out of prison. But I had my mom's funeral to focus on and had to pull myself together. By the time her funeral was over and everyone had left, I was exhausted and mentally spent. As I put my head on the pillow to try and sleep, Rita called. I sounded as glad to hear from her as I could. I didn't let on anything had changed. Neither with my mom's status nor that I knew about her and Henry. Or what I knew about Henry. I put on a facade of gratitude for her false sympathy when she claimed she missed me. As we said goodbye, I lied and told her the same. But in all honesty, at that moment, if she dropped dead, I wouldn't have cared. I had a few weeks off from work with bereavement. I knew things with Rita were over and done with. Whether she had treated me intentionally or not, I was glad to know the truth about her and Willie before any further lies and betrayal could occur. But I felt what both of them had done to me at a time when I was struggling to keep it together was just flat out wrong. I wanted revenge. I had any part of it I called my human resources. Then contacted the local police department and filled out the necessary FMLA, Family Medical Leave Act paperwork. I honestly have no reason to worry about getting fired. I needed to have my revenge on Henry. Even a minor charge would get him sent back to prison to finish his original sentence. But I didn't want him to just have to finish out his original sentence. I wanted new charges that would bring him so much time behind bars he'd never see freedom again. I met his parole officer on many occasions. With a record like that, I knew he'd have difficulties gaining employment. If he had a job, I had my doubts he was gainfully employed enough to be able to afford a new Buick and insurance. I parked down the street from Rita's in a car she would not be familiar with. I saw Henry's Buick in her driveway. I sat in silence. Disrespect he was being followed. Maintaining a reasonable distance. It was around 2:00 a.m. when I heard him start his engine before pulling off from her driveway. I casually followed him to his house, wrote down the license plate number, and parked down the street. I slept several hours in view of his house. After seeing no activity, I slept in until about 8:00 a.m. In the morning, I got out of the car and bought some breakfast. Throughout the day, I observed people showing up to his house at all times of the day, buying from him assistance such as cocaine, heroin. After a few hours, I noticed something obvious: he was selling narcotics. I went back each day at about the same time to document the continuing activity. I also observed each night at about 6:00 p.m. when Rita was getting off work at a restaurant or go straight to her house, at least not that house. I had enough evidence to turn into the local police. He hadn't been out to get more drugs. Not coming by, which was unusual. Cadillac Escalade pulled into his driveway. I usually see no more than one person get out of a vehicle to go into Will's house. This time I observed 3 large middle-aged men. They stayed in Henry's house for over 2 hours, which absolutely nobody had been doing. I was fairly certain the middle-aged man was the source for the drugs he was selling. I drove by taking a picture of the Escalade license tag at home. I downloaded the photos and video I've taken of Henry's activity to my computer. I made a detailed report citing the activity from the 4 days I'd observed what was going on. When photos of people heading for Henry's store to buy drugs, box for safekeeping. I knew it wouldn't take much to convince the police of what Henry was up to. I was getting the cops actual admissible evidence with times and dates stamped on each photo and video. The next morning, I went by the town's police station in Rita's town. I called me walked in. Our uniforms shook his hand. 2 of the lawyers in the firm I worked for about me. Even if I never passed the bar exam, date of birth, criminal record, he had not been rehabilitated and deserved to go back to jail for much longer. The detective agreed, but again asked what I want in exchange for the information. I pulled out a photo of the black Escalade with the license plate number. I folded the printout and put it into my pocket. The detective and I made some more small talk about. I haven't been driving for 10 minutes when my phone rang. I replied that it seemed she was busy enjoying life and that I didn't want to burden her with my grief. I quickly asked why she hadn't been. I urged them to hurry. I jumped into my car and headed to Rita's house. So, tell me honestly, after hearing all of this, do you think I handled things correctly? Was I justified in my actions? Or did I let my grief and anger lead me down a path I shouldn't have taken? Your opinions matter to me. I am trying to figure out if I am a good person at the end of it. I'm eager to hear your perspectives and understand how others might have approached the situation differently. Give me your thoughts. No sugarcoating. Just the plain truth as you see it. I need to figure out if what I did was the right thing to do.